If you've ever had back pain or persistent hip pain, you've likely had the experience of having a hyper focus to the sensation and wanting to work it out right there. But very often, the source of that pain is not necessarily in the area and is due to movement patterns or strength imbalances that, while connected to the back, are involving other parts of the body. And so with low back and hip pain, people often talk about things with the hip flexors, the hip extensors, tight hamstrings. These are really common culprits. But one area that is often highly overlooked is the inner legs. And so I want to look at that today. I'm Eric Stewart with Solaluna Yoga, and we're going to explore 3 very simple practices that you can do and you can modify in different ways that can help tune you into the inner legs, strengthen them, lengthen them, and connect them to the rest of the body in a way that can be very helpful for lower back and hip pain especially, but for a lot of other things as well. Okay, we're going to look at the anatomy in a very general way for the inner legs. And there's a number of muscles that are described as adductor muscles. Some of them are shorter, but generally we have the upper attachment is at the pubic bones and then running down the inner leg. So the shorter muscles such as the pectineus run pretty high on the leg, and then there are longer muscles such as the adductor magnus that span down further on the inner leg. And then longer still, the gracilis actually crosses the knee joint. So we have this whole span of different lengths of muscle that gives us different leverage. And as I mentioned, the muscles here are very much connected to the stabilization of the pelvis. They work synergistically and sometimes oppositionally to the abdominal muscles, to the hip extensors. And these muscles are really important for internal rotation and for stabilizing in order to move, in order to propel and drive through the legs. And if we're weak in the adductors, the pelvis is less stable and there's a less clear connection of force generation from the legs through the pelvis to the trunk. And this can contribute to back and hip pain. So we are going to look at some practices now. The first practice is a very simple standing practice, and you can have the feet about 2.5 feet wide to start. Could be a little narrower, and over time you can increase the distance. And this involves bending one leg, taking it forward. The weight will shift into that bent leg. I want the knee to come forward. And if you feel the inner leg muscle on that side, you'll feel that it's working. The other side, the inner leg muscles are also working, but they are working on length. They are elongating. So moving back and forth. The pelvis is going to move in terms of shifting to the bent leg side. The pelvis can actually move a little bit wider, so the knee will shift slightly in. However, it is important to avoid that knee turning way in, which is not so great. It will distort the relationship of the upper and lower knee joints. So encourage the knee to move forward rather than rolling in. To see that from the side, knee comes forward, and there's a turn in the pelvis. And again, every so often, check in with those inner leg muscles. Second practice is a modified bridge pose with a block. And the block is going to help us to feel the activation of the inner leg muscles. So as you lift the hips and the back up away from the floor, hug the block. And if you check in with the inner leg muscles, you'll feel that they're working. This practice is a good practice for connecting that inner leg activation with hip extension. So you'll likely feel that the glutes in back are engaged here. And then as well as the hip extensors with the abdominal layers as you exhale, especially being aware of the sides of the abdomen, the inner abdomen. So there's a drawing inward and maintaining a little bit of that activation when you inhale so that the inhalation expansion goes into the ribs, not just expanding the belly. So we have this whole chain of engagement, inner leg muscles, back pelvis, hip extensors, also the hamstrings, and the inner abdominal layers. But with the abdomen, important that this is a very supple activation. I don't want to completely lock down the abdomen. Rather, there's an inward draw through the exhalation. You can pause. And we're keeping just a little bit of that activation with the inhalation so that the belly just doesn't give way and expand completely, but rather that expansion is distributed into the ribs. Okay, come on down. That is something you can play with. And then lastly, we're going to look at a chair adductor practice. There's a few different variations of this. A bench or coffee table can also work for this. So have some cushion on the chair seat. First variation, leg is straight. And I want to clear access from the leg through the pelvis to the trunk. I don't want, if I turn the other way here, I don't want to get into a banana shape where the pelvis is rolled back and the ribs are rolling forward. I want to find that clear axis running through. So when you set yourself up, look down the leg, ribs coming into focus with the pelvis with that leg. The first variation is simply to remain here and press down through that big toe edge of the straight leg foot. In this case, this is my right leg. I am pressing down and you'll feel those adductors turn on. And this might be enough. This might be the thing to practice at first. There are other ways to do this, not in this position. So for instance, in standing, one could settle the inner foot against a door. I'll show this in a moment. And activate the foot into the frame of a door. Okay, next variation. I'm only going to do this on one side just to get through the different variations. Next variation is to press down through the outer knee and through the forearm and to lift up. So in this case, there's a little more load. You'll feel more engagement in that inner leg, but that is assisted by the external rotators of the down leg. So one thing that's nice about this is there is a reciprocal, there's a opposition. I have the inner leg of one side working, the outer leg of the other side. And that is what is often the case when we're moving. There's often this reciprocal oppositional relationship between two sides, which we see, for instance, in walking. So again, outer leg, external rotators on this down leg working, inner leg on the other side is working. To challenge this further, we could lift the knee off the floor. This is going to be more load. It'll become more load on the inner leg, the up leg. And then further, we could lift the foot off the floor. But I'll just emphasize that for this is not the thing to go to right away. I would recommend building up over time with those more supported variations before you get to this. It's important to condition the inner legs. Otherwise, you can strain those inner leg muscles if you're trying to do this. So it's very easy to feel what the inner legs can handle. And so it's important to start. This is the most supported of these variations, and you can feel and start to condition those muscles to that sense of work, and then build from there. Okay, I'm going to briefly show in the door frame, so you can take a foot to one side and have the feet a little bit offset, and then activate the inner leg. So I'm taking the leg, this is my right leg, I'm encouraging it to the left, but of course it doesn't move. And there's lots of other potential orientations. You can even find that with the floor with our previous practice, bending this leg and then stay here, activate the inner straight leg. So we're using the floor in this case for resistance. All right, I'm going to show one more variation of the chair. These variations are known as a Copenhagen adductor lift or activation. So this is a little different in that the knee is bent and I have my hip at 90 degrees. And it's just good to work with different hip orientations. So the previous chair practice, the hip is in extension. There's an axis from the trunk through the pelvis, through the leg. So with this, the hips are in flexion, and there's a slightly different activation relationship. So those are some practices to engage and wake up your inner legs. Have fun with it. If you find this content useful, please like and subscribe.